A lot of video games are built on and remembered for their atmosphere. Some of these include Breath of the Wild, Hollow Knight, and Donkey Kong Country 2. I used to have the perception that the only thing that mattered is gameplay, and this was during the time I believe COD and Halo were the only games that existed. The atmosphere of games is what immerses you into the world and gives you that sense of escapism or nostalgia. But having a great atmosphere is more than just some solid graphics, and I feel like I somehow managed to bring up Super Metroid in a lot of my videos. So I think it's time to look at my favorite aspect of that game, which to no surprise is the atmosphere. My first video on this channel covered Super Metroid vs Metroid Dread, where I had Super come on top primarily because I thought the atmosphere was significantly better. But after replaying it again, I looked for the small details that led me to this conclusion. The atmosphere in Super Metroid is still one of the best to date, and it's definitely not because of its graphics. When you touch down on Zebes, you're immediately thrown onto an eerily empty world, complemented with a darker sounding theme that then touches on your nostalgia through the starting room of the original Metroid. After being scanned, enemies will then appear in previously barren rooms along with an intensified soundtrack. The world has transformed from empty to hostile. Up to this point, you've already been through all these different looking rooms, but somehow they're able to seamlessly transition from one to the next. And once you make your way back toward the surface, you have an abundance of enemies that seem to be cohesive with the environment. The developers have established a breathing world within minutes of landing on Zebes by giving you a sense of loneliness, then revealing the hostility that this planet actually is. This sense of immersion continues for the remainder of the game by having this amazingly interconnected world between environments. A lot of other Metroidvanias will throw out a bunch of unique areas, however, none of them feel organically intertwined. It becomes more of just beating the boss and moving on to the next landscape. However, in Super Metroid, each time you elevator down from Criteria, it feels like you are truly diving deeper into the alien planet. So once you arrive to Brinstar, you are now basically in an underground jungle with some of the most iconic gaming music of all time. The further you go down, the more dangerous and fiery the planet becomes in Norfair. But instead of the continuous track down, Super Metroid takes you back to the surface where you can explore a wrecked ship that plays out similar to the opening of the mission. It's completely unpowered, and once you defeat Phantoon, the ship turns on and enemies are now abundant. Finally, you make your way to Meridia, which is a hybrid of inhabitants between the aquatic life of Zebes and the underwater base for the space pirates. Each of these environments connects seamlessly as a functioning world rather than just random elements for variety. Not once during my playthrough did I ever feel as if something was out of place. Meridia converges with Brinstar, yet is above Norfair. So instead of just continuously going down and finding new environments, you just remain in Norfair, and there are subsections that each play differently. You would expect this fiery section to grow old after returning to it for the third time, yet it somehow manages to remain fresh after each visit, and something that I noticed in this most recent playthrough is the vast room variety that Super Metroid offers. Each environment is broken down into separate sub-areas. Criteria has a multitude of unique locations that each offer different enemies, landscapes, and even themes. The surface is rocky with acid rain pouring from above. If you go west of your ship, you enter these rocky caves and the music shifts, creating a whole new tone. You don't need to travel far to find your way to Old Torian, where you can see the destruction from the original Metroid. So all just in Criteria, you begin outside, then make your way through some cave systems, then down to a destroyed space pirate base. Each room here for the most part is vastly different from the next, even within the same area. If you continue west, you'll find these breakable rocks, which are actually found throughout the entire game and usually open up paths to a surplus number of secrets. I think these hidden walls help immerse the player by requiring you to truly pay attention to detail. Regardless, once you make your way through this wall, you enter a corridor with tall mushrooms as well as enemies you have not yet seen. But when you go to Brinstar, you are now entering the space jungle of the 90s. These These rooms are filled with vegetation and life, but as you continue forward, you'll find a large room almost pink in color. This room change keeps the player engaged within the environment, and it's something a lot of modern Metroidvanias don't seem to do. Besides just the space jungle, you also have another amazing theme to complement Lower Brinstar, which has some water areas as well as a new looking organic environment. I could keep talking about this for a while, however, I think the point's clear that Super Metroid keeps all of its rooms distinguishable from the next. Some are open with multiple corridors, some are linear and require platforming, but they all have unique and lively backgrounds. There's also a plentiful amount of unique enemies to the area as well. The most notable among these includes the Magdo lights, which really just look like lava rising up. And even though the Sovas aren't much of a threat, it's nice having these fiery bad guys spread out between rooms. The Alcoons look like walking seahorses, but because of their color palette and ability to shoot fireballs, it makes sense they'd be in Norfair. You can even find a few of these guys in Criteria, however, they have a more greenish color than red. From my understanding, the enemies I just mentioned are all local fauna to Norfair and not a part of the Space Pirates, but the Space Pirates you do find in Norfair are red in color, which brings out the authenticity of the world. There's a handful of enemies that have color swaps to complement the environments. Some examples besides the Alcoon are Kakatax and Key Hunters. Even though fundamentally these enemies are the same, it's still a nice touch to have. Meridia has a handful of natural enemies as well, including the Ever, Sculptera, and the Choots. In addition to the local enemies, the Space Pirates here are primarily pink in color, but it's also the placement of them as well that give off that immersion within the game. The Ever are always in and out of the sand, and the Sculptera do a great job blending with their environment. Each of these enemies are part of their region rather than just being there to be there. But if there's one place in Super Metroid that stands out among the rest, it's the descent to Ridley's lair. The theme here I'd say is probably my favorite in the game and one of my favorites of all time. It's unlike anything else in the game and gives you a sense of urgency rather than wonder. This whole trek down is action oriented and fast paced. It might be more linear than other areas, but it makes up for it by having an increase in enemy difficulty as well as some good platforming. And just because it's more linear doesn't mean there isn't secrets to find as well. This area is the deepest you go in the game and it just feels more dangerous between the excess lava, the enemies, and the platforming areas. Once you make it here, it's really just a straight shot down to Ridley. But first, you have to fight these special variations of Silver Space Pirates. They're invulnerable to almost all attacks and can only be damaged after their jump. I'd view them almost as guards for Ridley, as they're only encountered here and Ridley's room is found shortly after this battle. The reason Ridley's hideout stands out so much is primarily due to the atmosphere and how it created such a fast-paced, hostile environment unlike the other areas within the game. I don't believe there is a single stale portion in Super Metroid, as I did enjoy every area, but unlike Ridley's hideout, the others didn't create that sense of urgency and challenge that I apparently really enjoy. In my humble opinion, I believe Super Metroid still might have the best video game atmosphere of all time. This is between the consistently amazing music, the unique, organically connected functioning world, the enemy design and variety, as well as the surplus amount of secrets and all of the other little things. There's plenty of games you could argue that have even more immersive atmospheres, and I'd love to hear your comments on what your favorite video game atmosphere is. For me, I do believe it's Super Metroid, and that's coming from someone whose favorite game is Ocarina of Time. This might be a very subjective question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts below. If you have any other video suggestions for me, I'd love to hear them, so please let me know in the comments below. And if you do enjoy content like this, please leave a like and subscribe as I try to get videos out as quickly as possible. So until next time.